In this video, I'm going to talk about a type of drawing called a reflected ceiling plan. I'm in the project file, and as you can see, we have the structures of the cavity wall, the steel frame, and the precast structure in place. For reflected ceiling plan, we're going to go to the ceiling plan section. I'll expand that and go to level 2. Now, before going into some of the details about this, I want to show you some examples. So here on the right, we have a partial reflected ceiling plan. By partial, I mean part of the image is cut off. What we see on here are all kinds of devices that are located on the ceiling. So you have the walls of the floor plan, but you also have these symbols. So for example, in this room that's called bedroom, I have a ceiling fan, I have some light fixtures, I have some outlets, and I also have some switches that are controlling the different devices. So this switch on the left here is controlling fan. Switch notation types. And this one on the right is controlling this series here of light fixtures, right? We have other devices here, different light symbols. It's hard to know without seeing the legend exactly what all of these are for. But generally speaking, there are conventions to what the shapes mean. This typically means an electrical outlet. This could be a telephone or data, etc. Now, there are variations on what might be shown on these. For example, on this one, we are actually seeing the doors, the door openings. And we're seeing things that are low, like this outlet here probably is about 18 inches above the ground, but we're also seeing things at a high level. All right, so it's kind of a combination drawing. Perhaps for this project, there was no floor plan. It was just this drawing with these devices shown on the floor plan. In other words, not a separate reflected ceiling plan. Now, here's another example. For a project that's perhaps more complicated. With this example, it's also a partial reflected ceiling plan. You can see these cut lines here and here. And by more complicated, I mean different types of lighting, different ceiling materials, etc. So in this case, for this project, there would very likely be an entirely separate floor plan and a separate electrical plan. The electrical plan would show those switches and the arcs that indicate which lights control them. This drawing would be developed by the architect in conjunction with the consultants, but it's really about the placement of these various elements. So you're going to include, probably the next phase of this would be to include dimensions. It says, okay, these are centered on what looks to be a drop ceiling portion that's located right here. Okay, and it may have a key also that says, okay, this light type, that's light type XYZ, and it would have the manufacturer and a lot of information in addition to it. But one thing you'll notice about this one is we're not seeing the doors. The cut line, where the horizontal plane is the cut line, can either be shown at a lower level, like normally it's around 4 feet or so, and that would allow you to show every door, every window, etc. For a reflected ceiling plan like this one, often what happens is it's taken above the door level. So if there was a door, let's say in this wall right here, we wouldn't see it because we're really just trying to illustrate these devices that are located on the ceiling. And for a commercial project like this one, you can see here, Hilton Food and Beverage Portfolio, it probably would have other types of symbols that wouldn't appear in, let's say, a residential project like the one we just looked at. You might have devices like fire alarms and light strobes that would flash to indicate that there's an emergency. So again, you have separate drawings because there would just be too much stuff to put on, let's say, a floor plan. Okay, so now I'm back in the Revit file, and again, I'm at level 2 of the ceiling plans. Now, typically, you would do a reflected ceiling plan for every level, but for the purposes of simplification, we're just going to have a single sheet of reflected ceiling plans, and we'll show each individual structure ceiling. So what's the advantage of this for our project? We may at some point get into adding devices like light fixtures and stuff like that to the ceiling. But one reason that I think it's important for us to include this in our drawing set is that we're going to be showing some of the elements that are going to be covered by, let's say, a concrete floor slab. So we don't get to see, for example, the hollow core slabs. And we don't get to see those K-series joists, because when you do a floor plan, you're making your horizontal cut and you're looking down. And if there is a concrete slab that's covering those joists, you're not going to see them. Okay, so a couple things that we want to do while we're in this level 2. First, we want to change our detail level to fine so that we see more detail. And another thing that we want to do is we want to go up to the visibility graphics. Okay, and I'm going to click on edit here. And for whatever reason, the default is that structural framing is turned off. Okay, so we're going to turn that on and we're going to apply and say, okay. All right, so hopefully you're seeing now that some of the elements that were invisible are now visible, particularly in the steel framing structure, and also my waffle slab should now appear. So when we were looking at it in 3D, you just couldn't really see this. So this is a useful drawing for that purpose as well. Another thing we're going to look at is the view range. So I'm going to scroll down the properties window here till I get to view range and click on edit. Okay, so this is something that takes a little bit of tinkering around with to start to understand what all of these settings mean. You might want to check out the Learn More About View Range, which talks about different plans. Let me make sure you can see that. View types and how they're going to appear. Let's put this back on the spotlight. When you're talking about a plan view versus a reflected ceiling plan. So it will kind of go through all of those components and talk about what they mean. So here's our reflected ceiling plan. And as you can see, this red line that represents the cut line is slightly above the doors and windows. So we're only seeing a very shallow space just right below the ceiling. All right, I'm going to change these to unlimited. It may not make any difference, but basically this will permit us to see anything that happens to be above that cut line. And I'm going to click on apply and OK. Now I'm going to go to the view tab and we're going to make some more call outs. Right, our current scale for this drawing is 1/8. And just to be consistent, I'm going to change this to 1/16. Okay, now remember that is the scale that we were using for basically these overall plans. So this is level 1, for example, 1/16 of an inch scale. And I'm going to go back to level 2 under ceiling plans and click on that. All right, we're going to create some call outs. And they will have the same size as the ones we use for the floor plans. We'll get some mileage out of these reference planes. Okay, so I'm going to click over here. I'm going to bring my bubble up to as close as I can to the intersection of the plane on the left. Right, and if it's not perfect, it's okay. Again, the idea is just to make nice, neat, orderly drawings. I'm going to click on my bubble here, and I'm going to put the bubble up in the same location that I did for my floor plans, like so. All right, now I've clicked on the new call out, level 2 call out 1, and I'm going to make a few revisions here. I'm going to pull these column bubbles in. Basically the same process that was used to create all those floor plan enlargements. I'm going to make sure that my current scale is set to 1/8. I'm going to put my detail level at fine. Right, you'll notice that we're now seeing a lot more information. And I'm now going to go back to the level 2 ceiling. And I will repeat the steps for the other 3. I'll make a call out. Okay. Call out. Here we go. Lower left-hand corner. Upper right-hand corner. And I'll just go ahead and continue making these. There's nothing in that last one, but there will be soon. I will go ahead and click on my bubbles and drag them up. Try to be in the same location on each of the sheets. There we go. And then you can go to each of the sheets. And so I have level 2, level 2, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I can rename these. I would rename them masonry. 2 is going to be steel. 3 is going to be precast. Oops. And 4 will be mass timber. Okay, and then I'll go to each of them. So masonry was already completed. Mass timber. I will drag those in. I change my finish level to fine. And repeat that for the other 2. Now, one thing you might also do at this point would be to drag these ends into the clipping plane for all of them. Okay, so I've completed those steps. As you can see, like on my structural plan, I'm able to see the full width of those K-series joists and all of the wide flange beams and girders. For the precast, I can see my hollow core slabs. Should be nothing on the mass timber. One thing that I would recommend that you do the same way we put 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, because we want to keep these in the same order. So I'm just going to go back and rename, make one change to the name again. Mass timber is going to be 0.4. That way, when we put it on the sheets, it's kind of more logical. Oops, steel is 2. Precast is 2.3. So next, we're going to create a sheet that looks similar to the ones that you did that have the 1/8" blow-ups for the different structures, the masonry, steel, precast, and mass timber. We'll just do one sheet of the level 2 reflected ceiling plans for each of the structures. So I'm going to go to sheets and right-click and new sheet. And for the number for this one, so we already have 101, 102, 4 through 7. And our next sheet, we're going to jump ahead to 110. and we're going to call them level 2 reflected ceiling. Like I said, we could have done a level 1 reflected ceiling plan, but it doesn't really show us that much more information. All right, so similar to the way that you did it for these other plans, you're going to drag onto the sheet the different reflected ceiling plans. So here they are: masonry, steel, precast, and mass timber. I would recommend that you use the grid guide that had already been set up so that you can have the same layout for these. So again, you might go back to these other sheets and just sort of see, oh, okay, where did you put the column bubbles for each of these? And what spacing did you leave, between the title block and the plans and all of that. But the goal is that this new sheet, reflected ceiling plan, will look in layout form very similar to those. Okay, so here is my sheet with the 4 layouts, and that's it for this tutorial.